My journey, I truly believe that I was born with the disease of addiction, because my addiction and my behaviors started way before I picked up a drug. It started with lying. It started with stealing from my mom's purse. I would steal her lipstick. It started with making up stories and seeing how far I can manipulate my mom to get what I wanted. And it also started with using outside things like that to get outside of myself, because I did not like the way that I felt. I didn't feel right in my skin. Sometimes my skin would crawl. And I was just so uncomfortable. I didn't love me. I didn't really know who I was. And I was like a sponge. So as I grew up in a not so good neighborhood, I soaked in all of the influences that were around me. And they weren't great. And I chose to soak those influences in and ride with it. When I was 12 years old, I picked up my first drink. When I was 13, my dad introduced me to marijuana. When I was 20 years old, my dad then introduced me to cocaine. And when I was 21, my dad introduced me to Percocet. My dad, for the sake of time, we'll just call my dad an addict. My mom is also an addict, so I was raised in that environment. I worked in treatment for a while, and I see people come in that have great backgrounds, great families, great homes. They have straight A's in school, and something just happened. And each one of those individuals explained to me that they just didn't feel okay in their own skin. That was what I felt. So I knew exactly what they were talking about. My dad was really sick, and introducing me to those things, was something that we don't talk about today because he still holds a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. But that's his journey. And today, through the process of recovery, I forgive him for that, and he's one of my best friends. And he's clean and I am clean. But it was a really rough road to get to where I am today. A lot of legalities, a lot of them. From the age of 21 to 24, I accumulated 4 DUIs. I was then handed down some consequences that prevented me from drinking. And it actually, instead of preventing me from drinking and doing illegal substances, it threw me further into the illegal substances. Because alcohol was not just my only drug of choice. Addicts like me call ourselves trash cans. I like it all. And people ask me all the time, what's my drug of choice? And I tell you it's more of anything. Today in recovery, it's more shopping. It's more, early recovery, it was more tanning. I don't tan anymore, this is natural. Today it's more chocolate. Today it's more, wall art on our walls. The Facebook marketplace is the devil. When I talked to Barbara yesterday, and I asked her, what is my focus here? And she shared with me that my focus is recovery as possible. I've seen a lot of people come into the program and then leave, and they don't make it back. My recovery journey started with a treatment center. It was my 4th treatment center. All the other ones I attended, I manipulated my way into completing, and it looked really good on paper. And I'd go home and continue on what I was doing. This last treatment center was forced upon me due to a possession charge of heroin. My disease did escalate to heroin. And I went to treatment because I didn't want to go to jail. 5 days into that treatment center, I used. We got some drugs delivered to the window. And And something happened to me that day. Something happened to me in that moment. And I realized that if I couldn't stay clean in a treatment center to avoid going to jail for years, something was wrong. And I begged to stay in that treatment center. And at home, I had a stash. I was ready to come home and use again. I didn't really want to stay clean. I just didn't want to go to jail. And I begged to stay in that treatment center. And that night, when I sat in my room alone, I cried and I hit my knees and I prayed. And I wasn't really quite sure what I was praying to, because I had done a lot of prayers. I hope that the drug dealer comes through. I hope that he's on time. I hope that these are real drugs. I hope that I don't get sick tomorrow. I hope that I can get some tomorrow so I'm not sick and so I can go to work. God, if you make the drug dealer come through, I promise I'll never use again. Those kind of foxhole prayers. And that night in that treatment center, I hit my knees and I prayed for God to take it all away. I prayed for help. And that was like the first time that I'd really asked for help. Since that day, I've not found a reason or a desire to pick up a drink or a drug or a mood and mind altering substance. Since then, my journey in recovery has been, it's been a roller coaster. Just because we take the drugs away doesn't mean we're all better. Drugs for me was just the symptom. I still had a lot of baggage to work through. One of those, like David mentioned, I'm also co-occurring. I live with intermittent explosive disorder, and I also have anxiety disorder. And what that means is it's a rather new diagnosis. And what that means is that my anxiety will start to get out of control, where I will explode. I throw things and I just act out. I call them episodes. And I had some of those episodes in recovery, and it was really hard because when I was using an active addiction, how I knew how to deal with those episodes were that I used, and they calmed me down, and they helped. So in recovery, I didn't have that option, and I had to sit with myself, and I had to deal with it, and I had to feel those feelings, something that I had never done in active addiction. I ended up going and getting help and seeking outside help, and I got medicated. And there's a lot of shame and stigma that goes around with people in recovery taking medication, for mental health. I will tell you that it has saved my life. It has saved my relationships. And I can be a productive member of society. But it's not just medication alone that has saved me. With medication, there is treatment, and you have to work at it. Medication alone cannot be your only remedy. So for me in my recovery, I attend a 12-step program. I fellowship in that program. I once saw a meme on Facebook that said the opposite of addiction is connectedness. And truly, I really truly believe in that. What I did when I was in early recovery is I introduced myself to every person that I met. When I celebrated my first year clean, there was hundreds of people in the room. You couldn't even get a seat. But then I realized, as I continued in my recovery, that it was about quality and not quantity. And those numbers decreased, but I today have a really solid group of women in my network that I can go to, that I can tell anything to. They won't judge me. They usually say, oh, I did the same thing, or I thought the same thing. So the connectedness that I have with other women has kept me clean and is what helps me stand up here today and share my story with you. I was talking to my dad earlier, and yesterday I lost a friend to this disease, and I knew that I had to come and speak today, and it's really been on my mind all day, and I'm kind of in a funk, because it's insane. It sucks. It does suck. I'm gonna try and not cry. And I was talking to my dad, and I said, I just don't know when the switch happens. When does somebody that's in active addiction decide that they want to be clean? And why did I get it and others not get it? What's so different about me? When does that switch happen? And, for me, that switch happened that night that I hit my knees, and I can't really tell you what happened. I do know that I gave up all control and I became completely willing to take any suggestion, and I took every suggestion, and that included staying in treatment for 60 days, living in a recovery house for a year, and not returning home. And it included a lot of other suggestions, and I took every single one of them except one, which is relationships. And then I was talking to my wife on the way here, and I asked her, what do you think the difference is between us and an addict that died? And she said, a bad batch. That's it. That's me and David and the other recovering people in this room were only an arm length away from dying. That's it. And because a lot of times when we're in active addiction, we want to die. We don't want to feel anymore. There's been times in my recovery where I've hit some lows, I've hit some bottoms, and as long as I wanted to live a little bit more than I wanted to die, I was okay. And I stand before you today, with 4.5 years clean. Today, thank you. Today I am a wife. I am a mom to be. My wife is pregnant. I am a certified peer support specialist with the Carroll County Health Department. More importantly, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, and I'm Heather. I know who I am today. I love myself today. It wasn't always like that. It's definitely a journey. Some days are worse than others, but the saying goes that my worst day in recovery is better than my best day using. And I'll just finish up with, to all the parents, to all the grandparents, to all the uncles, the aunts, the nieces, the nephews, the loved ones, and the families and friends in this room, I am so sorry. My heart goes out to you. I pray for you guys every night, every morning when I wake up. I know this is hard, but I am your daughter. I am your son. I am your niece. I am your nephew. I can't tell you why I got it. All I know is just don't lose hope in the next person. And thank you, Barbara. Barbara, you do amazing work. And you bring all these people together with all your hats. And this is what it's about. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without the major. We couldn't do it without the health department. We couldn't do it without us, recovering addicts. We couldn't do it without the parents that have the passion in saving the next person because they lost somebody. I heard once that grief is like a suitcase that you'll always carry around. You'll never put it down. But some days it's lighter than others. So I just thank you guys for all showing up today. Thanks.